I was recently made aware of a system for Arch Linux called pkgstats. This is an opt-in, okay, listen, telemetry system for Arch Linux, which basically keeps track of the packages users have installed on their system. It's basically like the Debian popularity contest, just for Arch Linux. Now, this got me thinking. So, most distros out there, take Fedora for example, install a lot of packages for you, but when you're using Arch, it's out of the box a relatively clean install. You get some basic things like systemd, the GNU tools, GCC, and some other things that you basically need to have there on your system. But most other things on your system, you choose to install. So this got me thinking, what are Arch Linux users actually running on their system? Not just what desktop they have or what browser they might be using, but random other things. How many people are using various different packages? And this system has been around for quite a number of years now, so whilst it is technically not official, because it's sort of this side project of one of the developers, Pierre Schmitz, this is why it's hosted on the German website, not the main website, it still gives us some very interesting insights. Now, just like any time I discuss data on this channel, there are going to be some very important caveats. Firstly, this is opt-in, and isn't really discussed that much nowadays, so you might have some sort of skew towards older systems, and again, any opt-in system is going to be skewed in one way or another. Secondly, it is just the raw stats. It is the percentage of users running this that have a package installed. That means it doesn't necessarily indicate how many people are using something. So I, for example, have multiple browsers installed, I have multiple desktops installed, I might have various other things installed that I'm not actually using right now, and I'm sure a lot of people, if they have a long-running system, probably have the same. Now, luckily for us, all of the graphs are totally public. There's no identifiable information, it is literally just a percentage of how many people have something installed. So let's go and actually explore some of the fun things we have. So this is a full list of packages, and you can see the percentage for various different things in here. Obviously, I'm not going to include every single one. I'm just going to mention a couple of fun ones. For example, this is Git. There's a problem here. This isn't 100%. So I believe there was a time where Git was in base devel. I might be wrong there, but I'm pretty sure there was. But there is about 8% of Arch Linux users, and before someone says, oh, what about SteamOS? SteamOS doesn't have pkgstats available. There is about 8% of Arch Linux users that don't have Git installed. And you need Git for the AUR. And Git is a dependency for random applications. Who are you people? Now, one thing I can't explain, and this is the case on a couple of graphs, there is a weird drop-off in 2021. I don't know if there was some sort of package rename. I don't think it would have happened with Git. Or if there was, again, maybe it was in a collection beforehand and then got removed. Not entirely sure there, but there was a point where it was almost 100%. But what about the Linux kernel? So this is actually trending downwards. Ignore this here. I think there actually was a package rename. That is the only way I can explain whatever the hell happened here. Maybe they were versioning kernels at one point. Not entirely sure. Kernel usage is going down. You might be wondering, okay, well, how are they using Linux without the Linux kernel? Arch Linux does package alternative kernels, and of course you can go and compile your own. Things like Zen, for example, have had a massive growth chart. This is at around 16% now. Linux LTS has also been going up. Very interesting. And of course, things like CachyOS kernel have also been going up. This is only at around 3.85%, but even so, every other kernel besides the mainline kernel has basically been gaining an audience. Another very interesting one is the Xorg server. So up until about 2019, 2020, it was stable around 5 to 8% of people that didn't have it installed. Some of those are going to be server installations. Some of those are going to be people that just live on the TTY. Some of those would have actually been early Wayland users. Some of them might have been Archon. Some might have been various other little X11 servers, like, you know, X3D6, or there's like a minimal X11 server. I don't know why you'd be running X3D6 in like 2017, but 2010, that definitely still makes sense. Around 2020, though, this is when Wayland actually started getting somewhat okay. Not good yet, but okay. And since then, it has basically just trended downwards. There is a weird little spike right here between October and November. Not entirely sure what that is. That might just be a singular month of, like, weird data. It's kind of unclear at this point. But this is what I'd expect to see. Now, I'd say, okay, it's still at 75, 76%. Keep in mind that if you're running something like Plasma, SDDM still does require having Xorg installed to actually run SDDM. It is the one component that you're actually required to have Xorg installed for. There's also, obviously, a lot of random little window managers on X11, and when you see the popular window managers, this number is going to make a bit more sense. Also, of course, you know, various desktops outside of KDE and GNOME are still quite popular. Also, people that just don't uninstall packages they're not using. Yeah. And before someone says, oh, well, what about X Libre? This is less than 1%. So, yes, there are people using it, but it's not a substantial amount of people, at least on Arch Linux. Let's take a look at audio. Pulse audio is a very interesting chart. I'll put myself up here. So, this is probably when it was first being introduced. This is when it became a recommendation. From there, a lot of applications started requiring pulse audio, so over time it naturally grew. Even by its peak, it still didn't have everyone. There was actually quite a few people running raw also. I'm not one of those people, but I do definitely know there were people like that. Then around here, this is when, firstly, Wayland started getting popularity, but also Pipewire started becoming good, and then just plummets off a cliff down to around 15% now. And this number's probably just going to keep going lower and lower and lower, because even if you're not using Wayland, I don't think most people have much of an attachment to Pulse Audio. And speaking of Pipewire, this also had a relatively expected growth. So there actually were for a while people sort of running both Pulse Audio and Pipewire together, not letting Pipewire manage your Pulse Audio. But about 2019, 2020, yeah, as you can see, most people have at least given it a shot by this point. I believe around here, there were actually quite a few bugs. So there was like this early adoption, and then people realized it still kind of sucked for a bit and then left. But over time, as Wayland has gained more popularity, as it's just gotten better, it has risen back up again. But a really weird one is Jack. What is this graph? What the hell happened here? So, it was basically nothing, and then around 2021, spiked to 85% and has trended downwards since. Now, there is a Pipewire Jack server, but that is a different thing from this. So, did it become a dependency for something really important? I have no idea what this graph is. What about Flatpak? Well, to be expected. It's just sort of generally trended upwards. There was a big spike in the last month, but overall, Flatpaks, there's more and more becoming available. People are using it more and more on their system. A lot of developers are choosing that to be the main distribution method. So if you want upstream support, you kind of have to get on board with that. And this is to be expected. One that you're probably curious about is, what about Snap? So it had an interest period going up to around 13% in 2022. But I think as Flatpak kind of got better and better, people saw less of a reason to use Snap, because Snap made sense because a lot of developers only supported Snap. So you could either compile the application yourself or just use Snap. Nowadays, I don't have Snapd installed on my system. I don't want it installed on my system. I think as also people realized how much it cluttered your system with loopbacks, people were like, that's kind of dumb. And it's sort of fallen back down to around 5-ish%. So people are still using it. It's just not, massively popular. Let's talk about the Nix package manager. So this had basically nothing up until, again, you're going to see this actually quite commonly. A lot of things that people have to kind of learn got popular around 2020. When people had time to just, waste on whatever they wanted, a lot of people tried out different things. And Nix has been getting quite a bit of, coverage over the past couple of years. And a lot more people are trying it out. A lot of people are realizing, yes, it might be difficult and new, but it's not insanely hard. It does appear to be mostly leveling out, though, around a couple of percent. Steam is another kind of fun one, because when it came out, it was kind of nothing. And then it just shot up massively, and has kind of leveled out. There was a dip here, probably this, you know what? Maybe this dip comes from people going back to work. I guess that could be it, but would that affect the overall percentage? I don't know. But it's kind of leveled out with around 40-ish% of Arch Linux users are some level of gamer. Maybe they don't play games every single day. Maybe they're not like, crazy hardcore. But a lot of people do use Arch Linux for gaming. What about the Rust replacement for the core utils? Well, it's not a very interesting graph. It's just slowly gaining more popularity, sitting around 2-ish%. It's not going down, so hey, that's at least something. There are obviously a lot of packages we could keep looking at. For example, Bash is at 100%. But there is another section of this website that does comparisons for us, and it has a lot of the things that people like to compare. Things like desktops, browsers, shells, lots of fun things. So let's just go down the list with the ones I think are generally interesting. At least for the top 2, does the browser number really surprise you? Mostly Firefox, mostly Chromium. These two are weird though. Lynx and W3M. These are terminal text-based browsers. I know there's random things that have at least W3M as a dependency, but there is a lot of people on Arch that have these installed. Also, for some reason, Google Chrome, even on Arch Linux, people cannot escape from Google Chrome. There is a relatively high number of Tor browser users, and then, Epiphany and Brave and lots of other stuff. But let's go over to the history, because this one directly compares things. So, obviously, most things are just right down the bottom here. I do wish there was more colors, so I could easily differentiate things, but I did test things earlier. So this green line here is Chromium, The purple line at the top there, obviously, is Firefox. This yellow line at the top is Lynx. And then we have, that is W3M directly under it. And it seems like things are kind of progressing down to, like, a minimal point. And you might think, oh, but, like, how are less people using web browsers? What I think this is actually showing is that over time, less people have multiple browsers installed. In the past, it was more common to have multiple because there legitimately were websites where they would work better on Firefox or they would work better on Chromium. That's becoming less and less the case now. There was a recent spike up in Firefox here, but besides that, like, it's just generally trending downwards. And I think this is ultimately a good thing because it generally means there is more compatibility. It seems like one of the few that is actually gaining market share is the Brave line down here. Now, it's merged in with the other red lines, but it is still slightly, it's like flattened and slightly trending upwards. That's the only one that appears to be growing. What is that other blue line? Angelfish. Angelfish is also going up. I've not heard of this one. Oh, it's a mobile plasma browser. Right. So I guess there's more people trying out Plasma Mobile? That's neat. Here we have text editors. Surprising no one, Nano is the most installed. Then Vim, and Vi is really high. This, I think, partially is due to the fact that Vi used to be part of the base package set on Arch and then later got removed. Obviously, there are going to be Vi users, and also Vi is a dependency for, at least an optional dependency for random applications, but I think that is why it is so high. Then NeoVim. I'm honestly surprised NeoVim is this far down compared to Vim. Probably also due to people just, naturally having it around for such a long time. Kate, obviously, is a popular option, but I think part of the reason why it's so high is, you'll see when we get to the desktop section. Anyway, over to the history. Light blue here is going to be Nano, and then darker blue is Vi. Both of these used to be incredibly common to have installed, around 90%. Over the past, 6 or so years, they've actually been trending downwards. Nano, not as much, but Vi has really fallen off. This red line here, that is going to be the Vim line. So whilst Vi falls off, more people are trying out Vim. Now, this pink line here, that line is NeoVim. Over time, more and more people are giving that a shot. And again, look when it happened. Look when, the most of the growth happened. Obviously, it's around when everyone was trying out new things. Yeah. And Kate has also been trending upwards. But I think a big part of that is also, again, because we've been seeing a trend upwards of Plasma. This pink line here, that one is the gedit line. That one is, that one's kind of fallen off. We also have the VS Code line. This one had a bit of a peak, again, around when everyone was trying things, and has since kind of fallen off a bit. Not really, continuing to fall, just mostly stabilized where it's at, because if you're installing VS Code, you're doing it to program, you're not using it as your main system editor for the most part. As for desktop environments, now desktop environments and window managers are two separate lists. I'll show you window managers in just a bit. The most popular one on Arch, Plasma by far, then GNOME, then XFCE, then Cinnamon, and the rest of them down below that. So this is actually a very interesting chart. Back in the early 2010s, GNOME and XFCE were basically neck and neck, with XFCE actually being more popular for a while. Now, I don't know why GNOME was this low. I think there might have been some sort of package renaming that happened around this point. But around here is when they diverged, around 2014, but they still mostly tracked each other. And now they're both trending downwards, with XSE obviously being far lower, but GNOME following basically the same trend. Plasma, though, there was definitely a rename. This, obviously, there was the rename from KDE to Plasma, but this has been massively growing, and over the past couple of years, like, has completely taken over. And it doesn't seem like it's slowing down. Like, it has its peaks, it has its dips, all this stuff. But I don't see this one slowing down. I think there will come a point where this very well passes 50%. And as the resident Plasma shield that is a big supporter of their fundraiser, I am very happy to see that. I think the reasons for XSE and GNOME are different, but it still leads to the same conclusion. XSE, it's just not as popular as an option, and that kind of creates this cycle of it not being as popular, and when it's not as popular, there's less developers, there's less funding, and things are kind of, hard to introduce as new features. GNOME, on the other hand, I feel like they're making a lot of changes that people are not generally happy with, and that shows in the number of people that are using it, right? Like, the point that it started to really trend downwards was during that shift into GTK4, and when that happened, that was just like, it sort of set the tone for the rest of it. Obviously, we are still seeing this weirdness in 2021, so take that with a grain of salt, but even so, I don't see this number recovering anytime soon. There is one here for file managers, but frankly, I just don't think it's that interesting because it mostly just tracks what the desktops are doing, but because the file manager is a separate thing, Nautilus is actually doing a lot better than the GNOME desktop. There's a lot of people that use Nautilus outside of GNOME. There's a lot of people that use Dolphin outside of GNOME, but this is kind of just like a mixed bag of random things. Dolphin obviously has been growing as Plasma has been growing, and there obviously has been a dip in Nautilus as, GNOME has been dropping, but it has mostly picked up, and clearly more people have it installed than have GNOME. Now, window managers might annoy some people. So, i3, Hyperland, and Sway all within 1% of each other. However, this doesn't tell the full story. Then OpenBox and, surprisingly, Niri has really popped off. Let's look at this chart. OpenBox used to be quite a popular option, but over time, as its development pretty much stabilized, right? Like, it hasn't really been getting major feature changes. It slowly fell off, and as more people gained interest in Wayland, it's just kind of like, gone down, pretty much. Now, i3 had a big spike around 2018 or so. Now, why did it have a big spike around 2018? Well, who was making lots and lots of videos about i3 and Linux and Arch Linux at that time? People like Luke Smith, right? This is why it popped off. A lot of people, myself included, got interested in trying out Linux and trying out window managers because of content like that. It then mostly fell off, and weirdly, it actually gained a lot of popularity around 2023. I don't know what happened here. Maybe people just wanted to try out a window manager, and from there, basically just trended downwards. Sway is this line right here. It picked up as it basically became the only good window manager available on Wayland, and then kind of stabilized around 12-ish, 13-ish%. The green line, though, this is why I said the 12.5-ish% doesn't tell the full story. Hyperland is going to the moon. This will be the most popular window manager. Honestly, by the time we see December's numbers, it probably will be the most popular window manager on Arch Linux. Just unquestionably, and this is not trending down. It had like a bit of a slow period here when early on there were some bugs, people didn't try it out as much, but ever since it got popularity, ever since a lot of YouTubers have been using it, ever since, obviously, distros like Amaki, you have a bunch of other people trying it out. A lot of people think Hyperland is really cool. It's just popping off. And Neri, my choice. Neri is down the bottom here. It's the pink line. It's not popping off as much, okay? The Neri people kind of like, we're slowly getting there. But there will come a time, if Neri keeps doing what it's doing, that it will probably at least cross the open box line. It's just crossed Awesome, and that is kind of cool for me because Awesome was the last X11 window manager I used. Now, you might say, what about DWM? Most people don't install DWM as a package, so it's kind of hard to get those numbers, so they're just not included here. If you're installing any patches onto DWM, you're probably just compiling it yourself, and you're probably not compiling it and then integrating it into the Arch package system. As for shells, now, ignore the Bash one. Bash is part of the base package set, so everybody has Bash installed. ZSH, though, has crazy installation. Then Fish. Fish is a lot bigger than I thought, and Dash is only down at 8.7%, but there is a bit of sadness with Dash. So, Dash used to be here. Dash used to be at like 90%. And the reason for that, the reason why people install Dash is basically, at least at the time, Bash was really slow at running scripts. So what a lot of people would do is they would replace like the system shell with Dash. So any scripts being run that you're not running directly from your terminal are just being run with Dash. This is what I do. This is what a lot of people do. Obviously, if you specify, I want to run it with Bash, it'll run it with Bash. But if you just ask for a POSIX shell, it wasn't going to run the incredibly slow POSIX mode of Bash. Over the years, though, that has just fallen off a cliff. And basically, no one installs Dash anymore. I still have Dash installed. I think you should install Dash. I think it's a good idea, but it is what it is. ZSH, on the other hand, this one gained quite a bit of popularity, and after, again, like a lot of other things, fell off, and then mostly stabilized around 50-ish%. Fish, on the other hand, this has been slowly gaining popularity over the years. More and more people are giving Fish a shot. And I was supposed to do so like 5 years ago and never got around to it. Maybe it's time to give it a try. Now, terminals are obviously going to be skewed by the desktop you have, but notice Xterm being really high. Also, notice Xterm falling off of a cliff. This is Xterm, not GNOME term. People used to just default to Xterm. But I think what has happened is Xterm didn't change, but a lot of other really good terminals came along. True color terminals, more random terminal features, and Xterm just didn't do anything. And it's not faster anymore. It doesn't have GPU rendering. It doesn't have fancy new terminal features. So it's just generally trended downward. But it didn't replace a lot of stuff. So I think for a lot of people, the terminal that comes with their environment is kind of just good enough. Things like console, obviously, again, because Plasma is growing, are going upwards. And also, Kitty is gaining popularity, which is kind of neat. But most other things, where's Alacrity? Alacrity kind of stabilized around a couple of percent. Most other things are just trending downwards. And the last one I want to show you is instant messaging. So, even in the FOSS world, and you know who you are, because, look, Steam is also popular to install as well, Discord is the most popular option, then Telegram, and Signal, and then Conversation obviously is part of the KDE applications. Now, as for the history, so, there was a time where Pigeon was really popular. What is Pigeon? It's an IRC client. And, as IRC becomes less popular, it also falls off. Same with IRSS, IRC. I don't know if you actually say it like that. That is also kind of falling off as well as IRC falls off. Now, Discord. Discord had a peak around, wow, would you be surprised at the same time everything else peaks? And then kind of trended downwards. I think a lot of people probably use Discord in the web, especially if you're using it on like Wayland and you want to do screen capture. You can't, up until like a year ago, you couldn't screen capture on Wayland with the desktop client. Also, people are probably using like third-party clients and things like that as those get more popular. Things like Desktop and various other things. Telegram sort of peaked around the same point, slightly trended downward after that, and Signal is the same trend, just lower, and like Discord is trending back upwards as well. Now, do I need to say about the whole conversation thing? I kind of already said it already, right? Like, it's getting more popular as KDE is getting more popular. It kind of does, like, level out, though, because even though it's a KDE app, it's still IRC, and people don't really use IRC. I wasn't going to show this one, but here's a random fun other one. So this is the architectures that people are using, and it's got x86 split into all of its different versions. Back here, you can't really see it. Back here, the base version of x86 was not popular, but still people using it. But V2 was more popular. V3, obviously, V3's been supported since, like, what? Haswell? Yeah, I think Haswell. And obviously, most people have a chip like that. V4 are, like, more modern chips. This is growing. V4 is, like, this weird, like, half-defined spec, though. So it's growing, but it's unclear what growing even means in this context. If you want to check out the rest of this stuff, though, I will leave it all linked down below. They have an API as well, so if you want to mess around with that, obviously, be nice, be good, all that stuff. But I will leave all of this stuff linked down below because I think it is kind of fun. Even if the numbers can be skewed because it is opt-in, I think it's kind of fun just to see the numbers we do have and understand, like, to some extent, what people are actually using. So, let me know your thoughts down below. Tell me if you find some, like, weird oddities in there. Let me know about some random package you might think is kind of fun. So, if you like the video, go like the video. If you really like the video and you want to become one of, not that one, these amazing people over here, yeah, Patreon, subscribe to LiberaPay, linked down below. You'd think by now I'd know how to do my outro, but apparently not.
Like this.